Ohio is hiding some of the strangest and most mysterious archaeological sites in all of North America. Ancient caves filled with Ice Age animals that shouldn't exist together, giant earthen serpents that align perfectly with the stars, and stone carvings that may represent a lost language older than anything we've discovered in the Americas. And to this day, no one fully understands them. Most people think of Ohio as farmland and cities, but beneath the surface lies a landscape scarred by ancient mysteries that have puzzled archaeologists for over 2 centuries. These aren't just old burial mounds or simple villages. These are advanced engineering marvels, astronomical calculators, and ceremonial complexes that suggest the people who built them possessed knowledge we're only beginning to understand. From caves that preserve evidence of humans living alongside extinct megafauna during the last ice age, to massive earthworks that required the movement of millions of tons of soil without metal tools or wheeled vehicles, Ohio's ancient mysteries challenge everything we think we know about prehistoric North America. Local historians have debated these sites since the 1800s, and modern archaeologists continue to uncover new evidence that only deepens the enigma. Stay until the end, because we'll uncover a site so mysterious that its true purpose has been debated for over 200 years. And recent discoveries suggest it might be connected to cosmic events that shaped our planet thousands of years ago. Most people will hear about these mysteries and then move on, forgetting them as if they don't matter. Don't be one of them. Hit subscribe right now, or you'll lose your chance to uncover truths that others will bury and forget forever. And if you refuse, at least explain why in the comments. Why would anyone choose to stay in the dark? Our journey begins beneath the earth, in a place where time stands still and the echoes of ancient footsteps still seem to whisper through the darkness. Hidden away in the rolling farmlands of Wyandotte County, where something extraordinary was discovered that changed everything, we thought we knew about Ohio's earliest inhabitants. Deep in the forests of Wyandotte County, a small cave opening leads into one of Ohio's most important archaeological sites. Sheriden Cave doesn't look like much from the outside, just a narrow entrance barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. But this unremarkable hole in the ground preserves evidence of human survival during one of the most challenging periods in North American history. 11,000 years ago, the last ice age was ending. Massive glacial sheets that had covered much of North America were retreating northward, leaving behind a landscape of tundra, wetlands, and sparse forests. The climate was harsh and unpredictable, with temperatures fluctuating wildly from season to season. Most of the large animals that had dominated the continent for millions of years were going extinct, unable to adapt to the rapidly changing environment. Yet somehow, small groups of people not only survived this catastrophic period, but actually thrived in what would become Ohio. Sheriden Cave tells their story through artifacts and remains that paint a picture of remarkable human adaptability and ingenuity. The cave was first investigated by archaeologists in the 1990s, but it wasn't until detailed excavations began that researchers realized the significance of what they had found. Layer after layer of sediment revealed a continuous record of human occupation spanning nearly 2,000 years, from about 12,000 to 10,000 years ago. This covers the crucial transition period when the Ice Age ended and the modern climate began to establish itself. The artifacts recovered from Sheriden Cave are unlike anything found elsewhere in North America from this time period. Stone tools made from high-quality flint show advanced knapping techniques that produced incredibly sharp cutting edges. Bone tools crafted from animal remains demonstrate detailed knowledge of animal anatomy and the properties of different types of bone. Wooden implements preserved in the cave's cool, dry environment reveal advanced woodworking skills that allowed these people to create everything, from spear throwers to basket weaving tools. But here's where the mystery deepens. Mixed in with these human artifacts are the remains of animals that shouldn't exist together in the same environment. Giant beavers the size of modern black bears, stag moose with antlers spanning 12 feet, and short-faced bears that stood 11 feet tall on their hind legs. These massive creatures represent the dying megafauna of the Ice Age, animals that required vast territories and specific environmental conditions to survive. How did these early Ohioans manage to hunt such dangerous prey? The short-faced bear alone was one of the most formidable predators ever to walk North America, with jaws powerful enough to crush the skull of a bison. Yet the evidence from Sheriden Cave suggests that humans were not only sharing the landscape with these giants, but also actively hunting them. The bone tools found in the cave include projectile points designed specifically for taking down large game. These aren't the small arrowheads used for hunting deer or rabbits, but massive spear points that could penetrate thick hide and reach vital organs. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, with perfectly balanced proportions and razor-sharp edges that would remain effective even after multiple uses. Even more intriguing are the wooden artifacts that have survived in the cave's protected environment. Among these are atlatl components, parts of spear-throwing devices that could propel a weapon with tremendous force and accuracy. The advanced design of these tools suggests that the technology had been refined over many generations, passed down from master craftsmen to their apprentices. But the most mysterious aspect of Sheriden Cave isn't what was found there. It's what it tells us about how these people lived. The evidence suggests they weren't just nomadic hunters following migrating herds. Instead, they appear to have been semi-permanent residents of the area, returning to the cave repeatedly over many centuries. This implies a deep knowledge of the local environment and seasonal patterns that allowed them to predict where game would be available throughout the year. Chemical analysis of the bone and plant remains from the cave reveals a diet that included not just the large mammals we expect, but also fish, birds, nuts, seeds, and other plant foods. This diverse subsistence strategy required intimate knowledge of the entire ecosystem, understanding not just when and where animals could be hunted, but also the seasonal availability of plant resources across a wide territory. The preservation conditions in Sheriden Cave have also yielded one of the rarest types of archaeological evidence: human coprolites, fossilized feces that provide direct information about ancient diets. Analysis of these specimens confirms the diverse food sources used by the cave's inhabitants and reveals that they were consuming plants that are no longer found in the region, species that went extinct along with the megafauna as the climate continued to change. Perhaps most remarkably, the cave contains evidence of fire use that goes beyond simple heating and cooking. Charcoal deposits and burned bones suggest that these people were using controlled fires to process materials, possibly to extract oils and resins from plants and animals for waterproofing tools and clothing. This level of fire technology indicates an advanced understanding of combustion and material science that allowed them to create specialized products for specific purposes. Yet despite all this evidence of human ingenuity and adaptation, fundamental questions about the people of Sheriden Cave remain unanswered. Were they part of a larger cultural group that ranged across the Ohio River Valley, or were they an isolated population that developed their unique tool traditions in response to local conditions? How did they maintain their cultural knowledge across the many generations that occupied the cave? And most intriguingly, what happened to them as the Ice Age ended and the landscape transformed into the forests and prairies that would characterize Ohio for the next 10,000 years? The mystery becomes even deeper when we consider that similar sites from this time period are extremely rare across North America. Most Paleo-Indian archaeological sites consist of scattered stone tools and kill sites where large animals were butchered. Sheriden Cave is unique in providing evidence of long-term habitation and the full range of activities that sustained these Ice Age survivors. This remarkable preservation has allowed researchers to reconstruct daily life in ways that would be impossible at most ancient sites. We can see evidence of tool manufacturing and maintenance, food processing and storage, and even possible ritual activities involving the careful placement of certain artifacts in specific areas of the cave. The site reveals a complex society with specialized knowledge and practices that were perfectly adapted to their challenging environment. But this adaptation came at a cost. As the Ice Age ended and the climate warmed, the ecosystem that supported both the megafauna and their human hunters began to collapse. The giant beavers disappeared as wetland environments dried up. The massive bears and cats that ruled the Ice Age landscape couldn't compete with smaller, more adaptable predators in the changing forests. and the people who had spent thousands of years perfecting their Ice Age survival strategies had to completely reinvent their way of life or face extinction themselves. The upper layers of Sheriden Cave tell this story of transition and loss. The advanced bone and wooden tools gradually disappear, replaced by simpler stone implements. The evidence of large game hunting vanishes, substituted by signs of smaller prey and increased reliance on plant foods. By about 10,000 years ago, the cave was no longer occupied, its inhabitants having moved on to adapt to the new post-glacial world, or perhaps having been absorbed into other cultural groups. This transformation represents one of the most significant cultural transitions in North American prehistory, yet we understand very little about how it unfolded. Did the knowledge and traditions preserved in Sheriden Cave survive in some form, passed down to later cultures through oral tradition and modified practices? Or was this remarkable adaptation to Ice Age conditions a dead end, a specialized way of life that couldn't survive the environmental changes that ended the Pleistocene epoch? Imagine standing face to face with an 11-foot short-faced bear armed with nothing but a spear. That's the danger our ancestors faced. And yet they survived. If you can't even click subscribe while sitting safely on your couch, what does that say? If you won't join us, write your reason in the comments. Just as the Ice Age survivors of Sheriden Cave adapted to a changing world, their descendants faced new challenges that would lead to even more mysterious cultural expressions. Thousands of years later, in Jackson County, another group of ancient Ohioans left behind, evidence that continues to baffle researchers today. But this time, instead of tools and bones, they left symbols carved into stone that might represent something unprecedented in North American archaeology: a written language. The Petroglyph site sits on a sandstone outcrop overlooking the rugged hills of southern Ohio. 37 distinct figures are carved into the rock face, each one carefully pecked and ground into the stone surface using primitive tools. The carvings range in size from just a few inches to over 3 feet in height, and they represent a mix of recognizable forms and abstract symbols that defy easy interpretation. At first glance, some of the petroglyphs seem straightforward enough. There are clear depictions of human footprints, animal tracks, and what appear to be simplified representations of birds and other creatures. These types of images are common at rock art sites across North America, typically interpreted as markers of territory, records of successful hunts, or symbols with spiritual significance. But scattered among these familiar forms are symbols that don't fit any known pattern of Native American rock art. Intricate spirals that seem to follow mathematical progressions, geometric patterns that resemble ancient writing systems from other continents, and abstract figures that combine curves and angles in ways that suggest they might represent concepts rather than physical objects. The site was created by people of the Fort Ancient culture, who lived in the Ohio River Valley between approximately 1000 and 1650 CE. These were agricultural peoples who built substantial villages, created elaborate pottery, and maintained trade networks that stretched across much of eastern North America. They were the direct ancestors of several historic tribes, including the Shawnee, and their material culture is well understood by archaeologists. What makes the Petroglyph so mysterious is that the Fort Ancient culture had no known writing system. Like all prehistoric North American societies, they passed down their knowledge, stories, and traditions through oral means. They created pictographic images on pottery and other objects, but these were typically simple representations of animals, plants, and geometric designs used for decoration rather than communication. Yet some of the symbols carved at Petroglyph appear far too complex and systematic to be mere decorations. They show characteristics that linguists associate with true writing systems: recurring elements that appear in different combinations, standardized forms that suggest conventional meanings, and sequences that imply syntax or grammar rules. One particularly intriguing group of symbols consists of interconnected spirals and curved lines that appear multiple times across the rock face with slight variations. Computer analysis has revealed that these variations follow mathematical patterns, with each version representing a specific modification of a basic template. This type of systematic variation is exactly what we would expect to find in a syllabic or logographic writing system, where different versions of a symbol represent related but distinct meanings. Another set of carvings resembles what archaeologists call entoptic phenomena, the geometric patterns that people see during altered states of consciousness. These might represent visions experienced by shamans or spiritual leaders during religious ceremonies. However, the entoptic symbols at Leo Petroglyph are unusually detailed and systematic compared to similar images found at other rock art sites, suggesting they might serve a more complex function than simple records of visionary experiences. The most controversial aspect of the Leo Petroglyph involves comparisons to writing systems from other parts of the world. Some researchers have noted similarities between certain symbols and ancient scripts from Asia, the Mediterranean, and even pre-Columbian South America. While most archaeologists dismiss these comparisons as coincidental, the number and specificity of the parallels is difficult to explain through chance alone. One symbol in particular has generated intense debate. It consists of a series of parallel lines crossed by shorter perpendicular strokes, creating a pattern that resembles tally marks or numerical notation. Similar symbols appear in early counting systems from around the world, suggesting that this carving might represent a mathematical concept or record of quantities. If so, it would be unique among North American rock art sites and might indicate that the Fort ancient people had developed numerical notation independently. The preservation of the Leo Petroglyph has been aided by the construction of a protective shelter over the rock face, allowing researchers to study the carvings in detail without worrying about weather damage. High-resolution photography and 3D scanning have revealed subtle details that weren't visible to earlier investigators, including faint symbols that were barely pecked into the stone surface and evidence of multiple carving episodes spanning several generations. This long period of use raises important questions about the function of the site. Was it a sacred place where symbols were added over time as part of ongoing ceremonies? Or was it more like a bulletin board, where different individuals or groups left messages for others to find? The evidence suggests both possibilities might be correct, with some symbols showing signs of ritual significance while others appear more utilitarian in nature. Chemical analysis of the rock surface has revealed traces of organic materials that might have been used to enhance the visibility of the carvings. Red ochre, a mineral pigment widely used by Native Americans for ceremonial purposes, was apparently applied to some of the symbols to make them stand out against the natural color of the sandstone. This suggests that the petroglyphs were meant to be seen and understood by others, supporting the idea that they served as a form of communication. But communication about what? The symbols at Leo Petroglyph don't seem to tell a coherent story in the way that pictographic narratives do at other rock art sites. Instead, they appear to be individual statements or concepts, each one standing alone without obvious connections to the others. This fragmentary quality makes interpretation even more challenging and raises the possibility that we're missing crucial context that would make the meaning clear. Recent discoveries at other Fort Ancient sites have added new dimensions to the mystery. Similar symbols have been found carved into stone slabs at village sites and painted on pottery vessels, suggesting that the symbolic system represented at Leo Petroglyph was part of a broader cultural tradition. However, these additional examples are often even more fragmentary than the main site, providing tantalizing hints without solving the fundamental puzzle of what the symbols mean. The most intriguing possibility is that the Leo Petroglyph represents an experiment in writing that didn't survive the cultural disruptions of European contact. Many Native American societies were in the process of developing more complex forms of record keeping when their traditional ways of life were interrupted by colonization and forced relocation. The Fort Ancient people were among those most severely affected by these changes, and their unique symbolic system might have been lost along with much of their other cultural knowledge. If this interpretation is correct, the Leo Petroglyph might represent one of the earliest attempts at true writing in North America, a system that was cut short before it could develop into the complex scripts we see in other parts of the world. The symbols carved into that Ohio sandstone might be the fossilized remains of human communication in its earliest stages, preserved by accident in a place where their creators never expected them to survive for hundreds of years. This possibility makes the site enormously significant for understanding human cognitive development and the origins of writing systems. Most of what we know about how writing evolved comes from archaeological sites in the Middle East, Asia, and Central America, where favorable preservation conditions and continuous cultural traditions have maintained records spanning thousands of years. The Leo Petroglyph offers a rare glimpse into the same process occurring independently in North America, providing insights that might not be available anywhere else in the world. But even if the symbols don't represent true writing in the technical sense, they clearly served important functions for the people who created them. The effort required to peck these images into solid sandstone was enormous, representing hours or days of work for each symbol. No one invests that kind of energy in meaningless decoration, suggesting that whatever these carvings meant to their creators, it was important enough to preserve permanently in stone. The mystery deepens when we consider that the Fort ancient people had many other options for recording information. They were skilled potters who could have created portable vessels with symbolic decorations. They worked with wood, bone, and other organic materials that could have been carved or painted with messages. They even built earthworks sites where symbols could have been incorporated into the architecture itself. Yet they chose to create this particular set of symbols in this particular place, permanently carved into a rock face that would be visible to anyone passing through the area. This decision suggests that the Leo Petroglyph site held special significance, perhaps as a boundary marker, a sacred location, or a meeting place where different groups came together for trade or ceremonies. The symbols might represent the collective knowledge of the community, important information that needed to be preserved exactly as it was originally recorded. Or they might be individual statements by different people, each one adding their own message to a growing collection of community memories. These symbols might represent the earliest writing in North America, yet most people will never even hear about them. Do you really want to be like the ones who ignore history until it vanishes? Subscribe now before you forget, because forgetting is how entire civilizations disappear. And if you're still holding back, type in the comments why you're willing to let knowledge slip away. The symbolic mysteries of the Leo Petroglyph pale in comparison to what ancient Ohioans achieved in Adams County, where they constructed one of the most enigmatic monuments in all of North America. Rising from a plateau overlooking Brush Creek, the Great Serpent Mound stretches for over 1,300 feet in the unmistakable form of a massive snake. But this isn't just the world's largest serpent effigy. Recent research suggests it might be one of the most advanced astronomical instruments ever built by prehistoric peoples. The mound itself defies simple description. From ground level, it appears as a series of earthen ridges winding across the landscape in serpentine curves. The snake's body varies in width from 20 to 25 feet and rises about 3 feet above the surrounding terrain. The head is marked by a distinctive oval formation that might represent the snake opening its jaws to swallow an egg or some other round object. The tail coils into a tight spiral, creating a pattern that mirrors the curves found in nature. But the true magnificence of Serpent Mound only becomes apparent from the air, where its perfect proportions and graceful curves create an image so striking that it seems almost impossible to believe it was built by people working without modern surveying equipment. The construction required not only an artistic vision capable of conceiving such an enormous sculpture, but also the engineering skills needed to translate that vision into reality across 13 acres of rolling terrain. The effort involved in building Serpent Mound was staggering. Archaeological estimates suggest that it required the movement of more than 60,000 tons of earth and stone, all carried in baskets by people working with nothing more than stone tools, wooden digging sticks, and their own muscle power. The work would have taken hundreds of people several years to complete, representing a massive investment of time and energy by the ancient community. Even more remarkably, the builders had to maintain the exact proportions and alignment of their design while working on such a vast scale. Modern surveying of the mound has revealed that the curves follow precise relationships, with each section of the serpent's body maintaining specific ratios to the whole. This level of geometric accuracy would be challenging even with modern instruments, yet somehow the ancient builders achieved it, using only simple tools and careful observation. The location chosen for Serpent Mound adds another layer to the mystery. The site sits atop a crypto-explosive structure, a circular formation created by an ancient meteorite impact that occurred approximately 250 million years ago. This impact created a ring of fractured bedrock about 8 miles in diameter, with the serpent positioned precisely at the center of the formation. The builders would have had no way of knowing about the meteorite impact through scientific analysis, yet they somehow chose to place their monument at the exact focal point of this cosmic event. The astronomical alignments of Serpent Mound provide even more evidence of the builders' advanced knowledge. The serpent's head points toward the summer solstice sunset, marking the longest day of the year with perfect precision. Other sections of the mound align with different celestial events, including the winter solstice and various lunar cycles. These alignments aren't approximate, they're accurate to within fractions of degrees, suggesting that the monument served as a massive calendar for tracking seasonal changes and ceremonial dates. But the alignments go deeper than simple seasonal markers. Advanced computer modeling has revealed that Serpent Mound also tracks much longer astronomical cycles, including the precession of the equinoxes, a 26,000-year cycle caused by the wobbling of Earth's axis. This type of long-term astronomical observation requires generations of careful record-keeping and calculations that were previously thought to be beyond the capabilities of prehistoric North American cultures. The serpent symbol itself carries deep significance in many Native American traditions, often representing wisdom, healing, and the connection between the earth and the underworld. But the specific form of Serpent Mound doesn't match any known cultural tradition exactly, suggesting that it might represent a unique synthesis of astronomical knowledge and spiritual beliefs that developed in this particular location. Recent radiocarbon dating has complicated our understanding of when Serpent Mound was built. Earlier estimates placed its construction during the Adena period, around 300 BCE to 300 CE. However, new dates from charcoal found within the mound structure suggest it might have been built much later, possibly between 1000 and 1200 CE by people of the Fort Ancient culture. This later date would make it roughly contemporary with the Leo Petroglyph, raising intriguing questions about whether the same people who created the mysterious rock carvings also built the Great Serpent. If the Fort Ancient attribution is correct, it would mean that Serpent Mound represents the culmination of astronomical knowledge that had been developing in the Ohio River Valley for over 1,000 years. The builders would have inherited traditions of skywatching and thinking that began with earlier cultures like the Adena and Hopewell, refining and expanding this knowledge until they were capable of creating such an advanced monument. Archaeological investigations have revealed that the mound wasn't built all at once but was constructed in several phases over an extended period. Each phase added new elements or refined existing ones, suggesting that the monument evolved as the builders' understanding of astronomy and engineering improved. This gradual development indicates that Serpent Mound was more than just a construction project. It was an ongoing scientific endeavor that engaged multiple generations of skilled craftspeople and astronomers. The absence of artifacts also makes it difficult to understand how the site was used by its builders. There are no ceremonial objects, no evidence of fires or offerings, and no structural remains that might indicate buildings or gathering places. The mound seems to have been designed as a pure expression of astronomical and spiritual knowledge, requiring no additional elements to fulfill its purpose. The preservation of Serpent Mound has been a concern since its rediscovery by European American settlers in the 1840s. Early investigators conducted crude excavations that damaged parts of the structure, and natural erosion has affected some sections. Conservation efforts have stabilized the mound and protected it from further damage, but the site remains vulnerable to environmental threats and the impacts of increasing numbers of visitors. The mystery of Serpent Mound extends beyond its original builders to include questions about cultural continuity and the transmission of knowledge. If the monument was built by Fort Ancient people, did they understand its full astronomical significance? Or were they following traditions whose deeper meanings had been forgotten over the centuries? The level of precision built into the alignment suggests active astronomical knowledge rather than simple adherence to inherited patterns. But we have no direct evidence of how this knowledge was maintained and applied. A monument that aligns perfectly with the sun and moon, built centuries before telescopes or compasses. And yet, most will scroll past, leaving it behind like it's nothing. Don't be one of them. Subscribe now. While Serpent Mound showcases the astronomical achievements of Ohio's ancient peoples, another site in nearby Chillicothe reveals the origins of the mound-building tradition that would define the region for over 2,000 years. The Adena Mound, rising 30 feet above the grounds of the historic Adena Mansion, represents one of the earliest and most significant burial mounds in North America. But excavations conducted over a century ago revealed mysteries about early woodland peoples that archaeologists are still trying to understand. The mound sits on a natural rise overlooking the Scioto River Valley, a location that would have commanded views of the surrounding landscape for miles in every direction. This strategic positioning wasn't accidental. The builders of Adena Mound were among the first North American peoples to construct large-scale earthwork monuments, and they chose their locations with the same care that later cultures would apply to building cities and temples. When archaeologist William C. Mills excavated the mound in 1901, he uncovered evidence of burial practices unlike anything previously known from prehistoric North America. The mound contained multiple individuals buried at different times over several centuries, with each new interment accompanied by the addition of fresh soil to increase the monument's height. This pattern of progressive construction created a layered structure that preserves a chronological record of the community's burial practices and social development. The grave goods recovered from Adena Mound demonstrate the advanced artistry and extensive trade networks of its builders. Copper ornaments crafted from metal mined in the Great Lakes region show that these early woodland peoples maintained contact with communities hundreds of miles away. Elaborate tobacco pipes carved from Ohio pipestone reveal not only artistic skill, but also evidence of ceremonial smoking practices that would become central to Native American religions throughout the continent. But the most intriguing discoveries from Adena Mound were the textiles, fragments of fabric woven from plant fibers that had survived in the burial environment for over 2,000 years. Analysis of these textiles revealed weaving techniques of remarkable sophistication, with complex patterns and fine thread counts that rival the work of professional weavers from historical periods. The preservation of organic materials in the mound has provided rare insights into aspects of ancient life that normally disappear without a trace. The individuals buried in Adena Mound weren't ordinary members of their community. The elaborate grave goods, the prime location, and the enormous effort required to build such a monument all suggest that these were people of high status, perhaps leaders, shamans, or skilled craftspeople whose contributions to society warranted special recognition after death. The pattern of burials indicates that this elevated status could be inherited, with some individuals buried as children receiving the same elaborate treatment as adults. One of the most mysterious aspects of the Adena burial program was the practice of cremation followed by reburial. Some individuals were initially cremated, with their remains carefully collected and placed in the mound along with grave goods. This two-stage burial process required significant investment of time and resources, suggesting complex beliefs about death and the afterlife that motivated the community to perform these elaborate ceremonies. The construction of Adena Mound required advanced understanding of soil mechanics and engineering principles. The builders used different types of earth for different purposes, creating a stable structure that has survived for over 2 millennia without significant collapse or erosion. The base of the mound incorporates clay layers that provide drainage and prevent water damage, while the upper sections use sandy soils that resist compaction and maintain the monument's shape. Archaeological evidence suggests that the construction of Adena Mound wasn't a one-time event, but an ongoing process that spanned several generations. Each new burial required reopening the mound, adding fresh soil, and reshaping the structure to accommodate the additional material. This pattern of construction indicates that the mound served not just as a cemetery, but as a focal point for community identity, a place where successive generations could demonstrate their connection to their ancestors and their commitment to maintaining cultural traditions. The tools recovered from Adena Mound provide insights into the technological capabilities of its builders. Stone implements include not only utilitarian items like knives and scrapers, but also specialized tools for working with wood, bone, and other organic materials. The quality of craftsmanship evident in these tools suggests that the Adena people had developed advanced manufacturing techniques that allowed them to create implements suited for specific tasks. The pottery found in association with Adena Mound represents some of the earliest ceramic technology in the Ohio River Valley. The vessels show experimental techniques and designs that would later be refined by succeeding cultures. Some pots were clearly made for everyday use, with practical shapes and minimal decoration. Others appeared to have been created specifically for burial contexts, with elaborate forms and artistic embellishments that had no utilitarian function. The mystery deepens when we consider what happened to the Adena culture after the mound was completed. Archaeological evidence suggests that the people who built Adena Mound were gradually replaced or absorbed by other groups, including the Hopewell culture that would build even more elaborate earthwork complexes in the same region. Did the knowledge and traditions preserved in Adena Mound survive this cultural transition, or were they lost as new peoples moved into the Ohio River Valley? The burial practices documented at Adena Mound established patterns that would influence Ohio River Valley cultures for the next 1,000 years. The concept of using earthen monuments to honor the dead, the elaborate grave goods indicating social status, and the community investment in ceremonial architecture all became defining characteristics of subsequent mound-building cultures. Yet the specific knowledge and beliefs that motivated these practices remain largely mysterious, preserved only in the silent testimony of the monuments themselves. The traditions established by the Adena culture reached their peak several centuries later in the magnificent earthwork complexes built by the Hopewell people. But nowhere is the mystery of these master builders more apparent than at the Tremper Mound and Works in Scioto County, where archaeologists discovered evidence of one of the most puzzling ritual acts in all of North American prehistory: the deliberate destruction of hundreds of sacred objects at the moment of their greatest ceremonial significance. The Tremper complex consists of a large geometric enclosure surrounding a central burial mound, a design that became characteristic of Hopewell ceremonial architecture throughout the Ohio River Valley. The earthen walls of the enclosure stretch for nearly a mile, creating a precise geometric pattern that demonstrates the same sophistication seen at other Hopewell sites. But it was what lay hidden within the central mound that created one of archaeology's most enduring mysteries. When researchers excavated the Tremper Mound in the early 1900s, they expected to find the usual array of Hopewell burial goods: copper ornaments, pearl beads, obsidian blades, and the other exotic materials that demonstrated the extensive trade networks of these ancient peoples. Instead, they discovered something unprecedented: the remains of over 500 elaborately carved effigy pipes, all of them deliberately broken into pieces and burned in a massive ceremonial fire. The pipes themselves represent some of the finest artistic achievements of prehistoric North America. Carved from Ohio pipestone, they depicted a remarkable variety of animals, including bears, wildcats, beavers, otters, hawks, ravens, and many species that are no longer found in Ohio. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, with anatomical details rendered so accurately that zoologists can identify the specific species represented. Some pipes showed evidence of extensive use, with bowl interiors blackened by tobacco smoke and stem holes polished smooth by generations of ceremonial smoking. But here's where the mystery becomes almost incomprehensible. These masterpieces of ancient art were intentionally smashed to pieces at what appears to have been the height of a major ceremony. The broken fragments were then placed in the central fire along with other valuable objects, creating a deliberate act of destruction that consumed thousands of hours of skilled artistic work. The heat was so intense that some of the stone fragments were actually melted, creating a fused mass of partially molten pipestone mixed with copper ornaments and other grave goods. The scale of this destruction is staggering when we consider what these pipes represented to Hopewell society. Effigy pipes were among the most sacred objects in their cultural inventory, used in religious ceremonies that connected the living world with the realm of spirits and ancestors. The animals depicted on the pipes weren't random choices, but carefully selected species that held specific spiritual significance, serving as intermediaries between human beings and the natural forces that govern their world. Creating these pipes required not only exceptional artistic skill, but also deep spiritual knowledge. The carvers had to understand the symbolic meaning of different animals, the proper proportions and details needed to make each effigy spiritually effective, and the techniques required to hollow out the interior chambers where tobacco was burned. This knowledge was likely passed down through specialized lineages of pipe makers who served as both artists and religious specialists. The deliberate destruction of these sacred objects suggests a catastrophic event that required the most extreme form of ritual response known to Hopewell culture. Some archaeologists have suggested that the ceremony might have been performed in response to an epidemic, a military defeat, or some other community crisis that demanded the sacrifice of their most precious possessions. Others propose that it might have been part of a mortuary ceremony for an extremely important individual whose death required unprecedented offerings to ensure safe passage to the afterlife. But the mystery deepens when we examine the other materials found in the ceremonial fire. Mixed in with the broken pipes were copper ornaments from the Great Lakes region, obsidian blades from the Rocky Mountains, pearl beads from the Gulf Coast, and mica sheets from the Appalachian Mountains. These materials represent trade relationships spanning thousands of miles and connections to virtually every region of North America. The destruction of such valuable imports suggests that this ceremony was significant not just locally, but across the entire Hopewell interaction sphere. The timing of the Tremper ceremony appears to coincide with significant changes in Hopewell culture across the Ohio River Valley. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites suggests that the elaborate trade networks and ceremonial practices that characterized classic Hopewell culture began to decline around the same time that the Tremper pipes were destroyed. This raises the possibility that the ceremony was related to broader cultural transformations that were affecting the entire region. Some researchers have proposed that climate change might have triggered the crisis that led to the Tremper ceremony. Paleoclimatic data indicates that the Ohio River Valley experienced significant environmental changes during the later Hopewell period, with shifts in temperature and precipitation patterns that could have affected agricultural productivity and resource availability. These environmental stresses might have disrupted the trade networks and ceremonial practices that held Hopewell society together, requiring extreme ritual responses to restore spiritual balance. The animal species depicted on the Tremper pipes provide additional clues about the ceremony's significance. Many of the animals shown were predators or scavengers associated with death and transformation in Native American spiritual traditions. Bears, wildcats, and ravens all served as guides to the spirit world, helping souls navigate the dangerous journey from life to death and rebirth. The deliberate destruction of pipes depicting these spiritual guides might have been intended to release their power at a critical moment when the community needed supernatural assistance. Archaeological evidence from the Tremper site indicates that the ceremony was planned well in advance and involved participants from across the Hopewell world. The variety of pipe styles and artistic traditions represented in the collection suggests that effigy pipes were brought to Tremper from multiple regions, each contributing their most sacred objects to the communal sacrifice. This level of coordination required communication networks and shared spiritual beliefs that connected Hopewell communities across thousands of miles. The burial mound that covered the ceremonial fire also contained human remains, but these were treated in ways that differed significantly from typical Hopewell mortuary practices. Instead of the extended burials with elaborate grave goods that characterize most Hopewell sites, the Tremper burials were cremated and their remains mixed with the ashes of the destroyed pipes. This unprecedented treatment suggests that the individuals buried at Tremper held special significance related to the ceremony itself. Yet despite all the evidence we've recovered from Tremper, the fundamental question remains unanswered. What crisis was so severe that it required the destruction of hundreds of sacred pipes in a massive ceremonial fire? The answer to this question might hold the key to understanding not just this specific site, but the broader transformation of Hopewell culture and the ultimate fate of Ohio's most advanced prehistoric civilization. While the people at Tremper were destroying their most sacred possessions in desperate ceremonies, another group of Hopewell builders was creating what may have been the most elaborate ceremonial complex in all of prehistoric Ohio. The Seip earthworks in Ross County represent the pinnacle of Hopewell architectural achievement, but excavations there have revealed artifacts so extraordinary that they challenge our basic understanding of ancient North American technology and social organization. The Seip complex originally covered over 200 acres and included multiple geometric enclosures, burial mounds, and ceremonial structures connected by earthen causeways that created a vast sacred landscape. The main enclosure alone required the movement of over 200,000 cubic yards of earth, making it one of the largest earthwork construction projects ever undertaken in prehistoric North America. The precision of the geometric layouts demonstrates knowledge that rivals the achievements of contemporary civilizations in other parts of the world. But it was the contents of the burial mounds within the Seip complex that truly set this site apart from all other Hopewell locations. When archaeologists excavated the central mound in the early 1900s, they discovered grave goods that seemed almost impossible given what was known about prehistoric North American technology. Copper breastplates hammered into complex three-dimensional forms, obsidian blades napped with precision that modern craftspeople struggle to replicate, and most remarkably, fragments of woven cloth that had somehow survived for over 1,500 years in Ohio's acidic soils. The copper artifacts from Seip represent some of the most advanced metalwork ever produced by prehistoric North American peoples. The breastplates were created by hammering raw copper into thin sheets and then shaping them into complex curved forms that would have required intimate knowledge of metal properties and advanced forming techniques. Some plates show evidence of multiple episodes of heating and reworking, indicating that Hopewell metalsmiths understood annealing processes that allowed them to create forms that would have been impossible with cold working alone. Chemical analysis of the Seip copper artifacts has revealed that the metal came from multiple sources around the Great Lakes, with different objects incorporating copper from Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ontario. This indicates not just extensive trade networks, but also quality control systems that allowed Hopewell craftspeople to select specific types of copper for different purposes. Some artifacts used high-purity native copper, ideal for detailed work, while others incorporated copper alloys that provided greater strength for utilitarian objects. The obsidian artifacts from Seip are equally remarkable, representing some of the finest stone tool technology ever achieved in North America. The blades were napped from volcanic glass that originated in sources over 1,500 miles away in Wyoming and Idaho, requiring trade relationships that spanned half the continent. The quality of workmanship rivals the best examples of obsidian technology from Mesoamerica, with blade edges that measured less than 1 molecule thick and cutting efficiency that exceeded modern surgical steel. Analysis of the obsidian artifacts has revealed manufacturing techniques that push the limits of what's possible with stone tool technology. The blades show evidence of pressure flaking using tools and techniques that allowed craftspeople to control the fracture of volcanic glass at the molecular level. This required not only exceptional manual skill, but also deep understanding of the material properties of different types of obsidian and the precise application of force needed to achieve desired results. But perhaps the most extraordinary discovery at Seip was the preservation of organic materials that normally decay completely in Ohio's burial environment. Fragments of woven textiles, wooden artifacts, and even traces of leather and fur clothing provide unprecedented insights into aspects of Hopewell material culture that are rarely preserved at archaeological sites. The survival of these materials appears to be related to specific chemical conditions created by the copper artifacts, which created a preservative environment that protected organic materials from decay. The textiles from Seip represent some of the most advanced weaving technology known from prehistoric North America. Analysis has revealed multiple weaving techniques including plain weaves, twills, and complex pattern weaves that required advanced loom technology and understanding of thread relationships. Some fabric fragments show evidence of dyeing with plant-based pigments, creating decorative patterns that demonstrate artistic sophistication and chemical knowledge of color-fast dye production. The wooden artifacts preserved at Seip include fragments of tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects that provide insights into aspects of Hopewell technology that are normally lost to decay. Analysis has identified wood species from across the eastern United States, indicating that Hopewell craftspeople were importing specific types of wood for particular purposes. Some artifacts were made from tropical hardwoods that must have been traded from as far south as the Gulf Coast, demonstrating trade relationships that extended far beyond the Great Lakes region. The mystery of Seip deepens when we consider the fate of the knowledge and technologies represented by its artifacts. The complex was abandoned sometime around 400 CE, and the advanced crafting techniques evident in its artifacts appear to have been lost. Later cultures in the Ohio River Valley never achieved the same level of technical sophistication in metalworking, stone tool production, or textile manufacturing, suggesting that the specialized knowledge of Hopewell craftspeople died with them. This loss of technological knowledge raises fundamental questions about how complex societies maintain and transmit specialized skills across generations. The Hopewell people invested enormous resources in developing advanced technologies and creating extraordinary artifacts, yet somehow failed to establish institutions that could preserve this knowledge for future generations. Understanding why this knowledge was lost might provide insights into the stability of complex societies and the factors that determine whether technological achievements survive cultural transitions. While archaeologists have extensively investigated the elaborate Hopewell complexes of southern Ohio, one significant mound has remained untouched by modern excavation techniques, preserving its secrets intact for over 2,000 years. The Shrum Mound in Columbus represents one of the last unopened windows into Ohio's ancient past, a time capsule that might contain evidence crucial to understanding the development and decline of the region's prehistoric cultures. Rising 20 feet above the surrounding landscape in Campbell Park, the Shrum Mound commands attention through its size and prominent location. The earthwork sits on a natural rise that would have provided commanding views of the Scioto River Valley, indicating that its builders chose this location for both practical and symbolic reasons. The mound's dimensions and construction techniques identify it as the work of Adena culture builders, dating to sometime between 1000 BCE and 100 CE. What makes Shrum Mound uniquely significant isn't its size or age, but the fact that it has never been systematically excavated. While virtually every other major mound in Ohio was opened during the archaeological investigations of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Shrum Mound survived this period of intensive research intact. This means that whatever lies within its earthen structure remains exactly as the ancient builders left it, undisturbed by the sometimes crude excavation techniques of earlier eras. The decision to leave Shrum Mound unexcavated reflects changing attitudes toward archaeological investigation, and the growing recognition that some sites might be better preserved for future research when more advanced techniques become available. Modern archaeologists understand that excavation is essentially a destructive process that removes artifacts from their original context permanently. Each generation of researchers develops new methods and technologies that can extract more information from archaeological sites, making it potentially valuable to preserve some locations for future investigation. The location of Shrum Mound within the broader landscape of central Ohio, Adena sites, suggests that it might have served special functions within the regional ceremonial network. The mound is positioned at a natural crossroads where several major river valleys converge, making it accessible to communities from across a wide area. This central location might indicate that Shrum Mound served as a focal point for intergroup ceremonies, or as a burial place for individuals whose significance extended beyond single communities. The decision of whether to excavate Shrum Mound has generated considerable debate within the archaeological community. Proponents of excavation argue that the site could provide crucial information about Adena society that isn't available anywhere else, particularly regarding the transition from the earliest mound-building cultures to the more complex societies that followed them. However, opponents of excavation point out that current archaeological techniques, while far more advanced than those used in earlier eras, are still developing rapidly. Technologies like DNA analysis, isotope studies, and high-resolution dating methods are constantly improving, suggesting that future researchers might be able to extract far more information from the site than is possible today. Additionally, the cultural sensitivity of disturbing Native American burial sites has become an increasingly important consideration in archaeological decision-making. Recent advances in archaeological methodology suggest that it might eventually be possible to investigate Shrum Mound without traditional excavation techniques. Developments in ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, and other remote sensing technologies are providing increasingly detailed images of subsurface features. Eventually, these techniques might allow researchers to map the internal structure of the mound and even identify specific artifact types without disturbing the site. The symbolic significance of leaving Shrum Mound unexcavated extends beyond purely scientific considerations. For many Native American communities, burial mounds represent sacred sites that should be left undisturbed out of respect for the ancestors buried within them. The decision to preserve Shrum Mound intact acknowledges these concerns and recognizes that archaeological sites have meaning beyond their potential to provide scientific information. The educational value of an intact burial mound also deserves consideration. Shrum Mound provides visitors with the opportunity to experience an ancient site exactly as it was left by its builders, without the modifications and interpretations that inevitably accompany archaeological excavation. This authentic encounter with the past might be more meaningful for many people than viewing artifacts in a museum display, removed from their original context. The debate over Shrum Mound reflects broader questions about the goals and methods of archaeological research. Should the primary objective be to extract maximum information from ancient sites using current techniques? Or should some sites be preserved for future researchers who might have access to more advanced methods? How do we balance scientific curiosity against respect for Native American cultural values and burial practices? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're becoming increasingly important as archaeological sites face growing threats from development and environmental change. The mystery of what lies within Shrum Mound continues to capture the imagination of researchers and the public alike. Every other major Adena site in Ohio has been excavated, its secrets revealed, and its artifacts distributed among museums and research collections. Shrum Mound stands alone as a complete, intact example of Adena mortuary architecture, preserving whatever stories its builders intended to tell for over 2 millennia. The mound-building traditions of Ohio reached their final expression in the work of the Fort Ancient people, who created some of the most enigmatic earthworks in all of North America. In a quiet grove near Granville, the Alligator effigy mound presents visitors with a puzzle that challenges everything archaeologists thought they understood about prehistoric Ohio cultures and their relationship with the natural world. The earthwork gets its name from early European American settlers, who thought its distinctive shape resembled an alligator basking on the banks of a river. The mound stretches nearly 200 feet in length and rises about 4 feet above the surrounding ground, creating an unmistakable animal form when viewed from above. But alligators haven't lived in Ohio for millions of years, long before any human beings existed in North America. So what were the Fort Ancient builders actually trying to represent when they invested enormous effort into creating this mysterious effigy? Modern archaeologists believe the mound actually depicts the underwater panther, a supernatural being that appears in the religious traditions of many Native American cultures throughout the Great Lakes and Ohio River Valley regions. This mythical creature was said to inhabit the depths of rivers and lakes, controlling water levels, weather patterns, and the spiritual forces associated with the underwater realm. The underwater panther was both feared and revered, considered powerful enough to grant protection and prosperity, but also capable of bringing floods, storms, and other aquatic disasters. The Fort Ancient people who built the Alligator effigy mound, lived in the area between approximately 1000 and 1650 CE, making them among the last prehistoric cultures to inhabit Ohio before European contact. They were accomplished farmers who grew corn, beans, and squash in the fertile river valleys, and they maintained trade relationships that connected them to communities across the eastern United States. Their villages were substantial settlements with hundreds of inhabitants, and their material culture shows considerable sophistication in pottery making, tool production, and artistic expression. But the Fort Ancient people also inherited the mound-building traditions of their predecessors, including the Adena and Hopewell cultures that had dominated the region for over 1,000 years before them. They built burial mounds, ceremonial enclosures, and effigy earthworks that continued the ancient practice of modifying the landscape for spiritual and social purposes. However, their earthworks often showed distinctly different characteristics from earlier traditions, incorporating new symbolic elements and architectural innovations that reflected their own cultural beliefs and practices. The construction of the Alligator effigy mound required advanced understanding of the creature being represented and careful planning to translate that form into a large-scale earthwork. The builders had to maintain the proper proportions and anatomical details while working on a scale that prevented them from seeing the overall effect of their work. This suggests they were working from detailed plans or mental templates that had been developed through careful observation and artistic tradition. The location chosen for the effigy adds another layer of meaning to the monument. The mound sits on a rise overlooking a creek valley, positioned where it would have been visible from water approaches and travel routes through the area. This prominent placement suggests that the effigy was meant to be seen by people passing through the region, possibly serving as a territorial marker or spiritual guardian that protected the local community from supernatural threats. Archaeological investigation of the Alligator effigy mound has revealed construction techniques that differ significantly from the burial mounds built by earlier cultures. Instead of the layered construction typical of mortuary earthworks, the effigy appears to have been built in a single episode using carefully selected soils that created a stable structure resistant to erosion. Unlike most other mounds in Ohio, the Alligator effigy doesn't appear to contain burials or significant artifact deposits. Archaeological investigations have revealed only scattered remains of everyday activities, suggesting that the mound's primary function was symbolic rather than mortuary. This distinction indicates that effigy mounds served different purposes than burial mounds, possibly functioning as territorial markers, ceremonial gathering places, or spiritual landmarks that help define the cultural landscape. The symbolic meaning of the underwater panther in Native American religious traditions provides important clues about the mound's significance. This supernatural being was associated with the power to control weather, particularly the storms and floods that could devastate agricultural communities. By creating a permanent representation of the underwater panther in their landscape, the Fort Ancient people might have been seeking to establish a relationship with this powerful spirit that would protect their crops and communities from water-related disasters. The artistic traditions of the Fort Ancient people, as revealed through their pottery and other artifacts, show strong emphasis on animal symbolism and supernatural beings. The creatures depicted in their art often combine characteristics of different animals, or show features that identify them as mythological rather than natural beings. The Alligator effigy fits within this broader artistic tradition, representing the three-dimensional expression of spiritual concepts that also appeared in portable art forms. The Alligator effigy mound stands as a testament to the enduring human need to create meaningful relationships with the supernatural forces that govern the natural world. In an era when climate change and environmental degradation threaten communities around the globe, the ancient builders' attempt to establish spiritual protection against natural disasters resonates with contemporary concerns. Their solution, embodied in earth and stone, offers a different perspective on how human communities might seek security in an uncertain world. At the apex of Ohio's ancient mysteries stands the most imposing earthwork ever constructed in the state, a monument so massive that it defies easy explanation, even by the standards of a region famous for its prehistoric architectural achievements. The Miamisburg Mound rises 65 feet above the Great Miami River Valley, its perfectly conical form visible for miles across the surrounding countryside. With a base circumference of over 800 feet, it represents the single largest burial mound built by any prehistoric North American culture. The sheer scale of Miamisburg Mound staggers the imagination. Archaeological estimates suggest that its construction required the movement of over 300,000 tons of earth, all transported in baskets by people working with nothing more than stone tools and wooden implements. The workforce needed for such a project would have numbered in the thousands, requiring coordination and social organization on a scale that challenges our understanding of prehistoric Ohio cultures. Yet somehow, between 1,000 and 2,000 years ago, the people of this region managed to create a monument that rivals the Great Pyramids of other civilizations in its ambition and engineering sophistication. The location chosen for this massive undertaking wasn't random. The mound sits on a natural ridge overlooking the confluence of several river valleys, positioning it at the center of a transportation and communication network that connected communities across southwestern Ohio and beyond. From its summit, observers would have had commanding views of the surrounding landscape, allowing them to monitor travel routes, track weather patterns, and communicate with other settlements through smoke signals or other visual means. When European American settlers first encountered Miamisburg Mound in the early 1800s, they found it difficult to believe that prehistoric peoples could have constructed such an enormous monument. The perfectly maintained conical shape, the precise geometric proportions, and the massive scale all suggested engineering capabilities that seemed inconsistent with their assumptions about Native American technological achievements. Some early investigators even proposed that the mound must have been built by a lost civilization of European or Asian origin, an idea that persisted well into the 20th century despite lacking any supporting evidence. The first systematic investigation of Miamisburg Mound took place in 1869, when a team led by Dr. Charles Whittlesey excavated a shaft from the top of the monument down to its base. The excavation revealed evidence of multiple construction phases with different types of soil and construction techniques used for different sections of the mound. This layered construction suggests that the monument wasn't built in a single massive effort, but was expanded and modified over several generations, with each phase adding new height and volume to the growing structure. The artifacts recovered from the 1869 excavation provided tantalizing clues about the people buried within Miamisburg Mound, but they also raised new questions about the monument's function and significance. The excavators found evidence of cremated human remains, copper ornaments, stone tools, and pottery vessels, typical of Adena culture burial practices. However, the quantities of these materials were relatively modest given the enormous size of the mound, suggesting that the monument's significance extended far beyond its function as a cemetery. The discovery of multiple burial levels within the mound indicates that it served as a community cemetery for several centuries, with new interments added as the structure grew taller and more imposing. This pattern of progressive construction is characteristic of Adena burial practices, but the scale achieved at Miamisburg far exceeds anything found at other sites. The community that built this monument was clearly capable of mobilizing labor and resources on an unprecedented scale, suggesting social organization and economic capabilities that surpassed those of typical Adena societies. Chemical analysis of soils from different levels of Miamisburg Mound has revealed that the builders carefully selected materials from various locations around the region, choosing specific types of earth for different construction phases. Some layers incorporated clay that provided structural stability and water resistance, while others used sandy soils that allowed for proper drainage and prevented the accumulation of moisture that could damage organic materials within the mound. This advanced understanding of soil properties and engineering principles enabled the builders to create a monument that has survived for nearly 2,000 years with minimal erosion or structural damage. The precision evident in Miamisburg Mound's construction reveals knowledge of geometric principles that rivals the achievements of contemporary civilizations in other parts of the world. The base of the mound forms a nearly perfect circle, and the sides rise at precisely calculated angles that create the optimal balance between height and structural stability. Recent surveys using modern measuring equipment have confirmed that these proportions follow relationships that appear in sacred architecture from many different cultures, suggesting that the builders were working from advanced architectural principles rather than simple trial and error. The mystery of why Miamisburg Mound was built on such an unprecedented scale remains one of the most intriguing questions in Ohio archaeology. The enormous investment of labor and resources suggests that the monument served functions that went far beyond the burial of individual community members. It might have been a territorial marker that established the dominance of a particular group over a large region, a ceremonial center that drew participants from across the Ohio River Valley, or a symbolic representation of cosmic beliefs that required monumental expression. Some researchers have proposed that Miamisburg Mound might have been built in response to specific historical circumstances that required an extraordinary community response. Climate changes, population pressures, or conflicts with neighboring groups might have created conditions that motivated the builders to invest in such a massive and permanent statement of their presence and capabilities. However, the archaeological record doesn't preserve direct evidence of such circumstances, leaving these explanations speculative. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Miamisburg Mound isn't what it tells us about its builders, but what it reveals about the limits of archaeological interpretation. Despite decades of investigation and analysis, we still don't fully understand why the monument was built, how the necessary social organization was achieved, or what specific beliefs and practices motivated such an enormous investment of community resources. The mound stands as a permanent reminder that the past holds secrets that may never be fully revealed, no matter how advanced our investigative techniques become. As we stand back and consider these 9 remarkable sites scattered across Ohio's ancient landscape, a pattern emerges that's both fascinating and deeply puzzling. From the Ice Age survival strategies preserved in Sheriden Cave to the astronomical sophistication of Serpent Mound, from the possible writing system at Petroglyph to the monumental achievement of Miamisburg Mound, we see evidence of human cultures that were far more complex, knowledgeable, and capable than most people realize. Yet for all their achievements, these cultures remain largely mysterious to us. We can describe their artifacts, map their earthworks, and analyze their construction techniques, but we still don't understand the beliefs, motivations, and knowledge systems that drove them to create such remarkable works. The symbols carved at Petroglyph might represent a lost writing system, but we can't read what they say. The astronomical alignments at Serpent Mound demonstrate advanced sky watching, but we don't know how this knowledge was used or what it meant to its creators. The deliberate destruction of sacred pipes at Tremper reveals crisis and desperation, but we don't know what catastrophe required such an extreme ritual response. The preservation of organic materials at Seip provides unprecedented insights into ancient technology, but we don't understand the social systems that supported such specialized craftsmanship. The unopened Shrum mound might contain answers to some of these questions, but it also represents our recognition that some mysteries might be better preserved than solved. Perhaps most intriguingly, these sites seem to represent different experiments in human social organization and cultural expression. The Ice Age hunters of Sheriden Cave developed advanced adaptation strategies that allowed them to thrive during one of the most challenging periods in human history. The Adena people pioneered mound-building traditions that would influence Ohio River Valley cultures for over 1,000 years. The Hopewell created trade networks and ceremonial complexes that connected most of eastern North America in webs of exchange and shared symbolism. The Fort Ancient people inherited these traditions but modified them to reflect their own beliefs and circumstances, creating effigy mounds and rock art sites that combined ancient symbols with new forms of expression. Each culture built upon the achievements of their predecessors while also developing their own solutions to the challenges of life in the Ohio River Valley. But all of these remarkable cultures eventually disappeared, their knowledge systems lost, their monuments abandoned, their populations absorbed into other groups or scattered by the disruptions of European contact and colonization. This pattern of cultural rise and decline raises profound questions about the stability of human societies and the factors that determine whether knowledge and traditions survive across generations. The mysteries of ancient Ohio also remind us how much we still don't know about human history and cultural development. These sites preserve evidence of achievements and capabilities that don't fit neatly into our standard narratives about the development of civilization. They suggest that the path from hunting and gathering to complex society wasn't a simple linear progression, but a series of experiments, innovations, and alternative approaches that produced remarkable results in unexpected places. Yet these achievements were accomplished by peoples who left no written records, built no cities, and developed no metal tools beyond simple copper working. They represent a different model of cultural complexity, one that achieved remarkable sophistication while maintaining closer connections to the natural world and more egalitarian social relationships than the state-level societies that developed in other parts of the world. The preservation and interpretation of these sites faces ongoing challenges that reflect broader tensions in contemporary society. How do we balance scientific investigation with respect for Native American cultural values and burial practices? How do we protect archaeological sites from development pressure while making them accessible for education and inspiration? How do we maintain interest and support for preservation efforts when the cultures that created these monuments are no longer present to speak for themselves? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're becoming increasingly urgent as archaeological sites face growing threats from climate change, urban development, and inadequate funding for preservation efforts. The mysteries of ancient Ohio won't remain mysteries forever if the sites that preserve them are destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Perhaps the greatest lesson we can learn from Ohio's ancient mysteries is humility about our own knowledge and assumptions. These remarkable cultures achieved things we're still trying to understand using methods we can barely imagine. They developed solutions to human challenges that we haven't considered and created works of lasting beauty and significance that continue to inspire wonder and respect thousands of years after their creators vanished from history. In the end, perhaps that's the greatest mystery of all, not what these ancient peoples were trying to tell us through their monuments and symbols, but what we're willing to learn from them about the endless possibilities of human creativity and achievement. Their secrets are still being revealed, one discovery at a time, reminding us that the most profound mysteries are often hidden in the most familiar places, waiting patiently for someone curious enough to look beneath the surface and ask the questions that might change everything we thought we knew. The mysteries of Ohio are not just about the past. They're warnings about how easily knowledge disappears. If you walk away without subscribing, you're doing exactly what those farmers did when they plowed mounds flat, burying history, never to return. Don't make that mistake. Subscribe now.